everybody. Thank you so much for being with us here, Fluency Corp's Expat Chat, that we will have at least 3 or 4 times a month is our goal here. And today with us, we have Colleen. Colleen, can you say your whole name for me so it can be said beautifully?
Absolutely. Colleen Vucinovich.
Vucinovich. And what is the origin of that beautiful last name?
I married a man whose family was from Croatia. My mom told me that I should marry someone with a short surname, and I was paying no attention. I married for love.
I love it. I love that. Yeah. I've definitely dated people before and been like, that's an interesting last name I would have and you got one too. So you are not Croatian.
I am not Croatian. I'm South African. My husband and I are both, and his family, I believe, emigrated from former Yugoslavia, as it was known. And I believe his great-grandfather arrived in 1893 or something like that.
Yeah. To South Africa.
Exactly. Yes, we are a melting pot of all kinds of people.
Okay. So he is South African born and bred, but has family from Croatia.
Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful. That's a whole other broadcast and story. That's so cool. Okay, so South Africa. So one of the first things that I like to ask so that people can really know what's going to be spoken about in the talk today is, where did you grow up? Where did you become an adult? And then where did you move later? So that people know the locations that we're going to discuss right off the bat.
Absolutely. I grew up in South Africa, and I lived in a number of cities within South Africa, and I was an adult there as well. I left South Africa in my early 40s, went to the UK, spent nearly 3 years in the UK, and then went from the UK to the US, where I currently live in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay, so we have South Africa. I'm going to write it down. And then at what age was the UK?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
At what age, more or less, was the UK?
Early 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And then mid-40s to the US.
Okay, very good.
And I'm not going to say how long I've been here, because then, it's out there.
Yeah, it's out there, yeah. Okay. I love this, though, because last week we spoke with someone that moved in, Robert, from Paramount Transportation, like in their 20s, and then later married in his 30s, and then later with kids to another country in his 40s. So getting all these different perspectives, because it's very different moving in your 20s than in your 40s.
Absolutely.
I think. Absolutely. So tell me about that first move, and why did you move?
We had decided that we were going to emigrate from SA, and we were planning on going to Canada. Okay. My husband had been for an interview. We were making plans to make the move, and the job offer fell through. And I think that had to do with legal requirements, actually. And then my mom and dad had relocated to the UK 10 years prior, my mom on an ancestral visa. And there was a family situation that evolved, and going to Canada was completely the wrong thing for us. We needed to be in the UK, and that's what we did. So in order to get to the UK, as a South African citizen, it's pretty difficult to get into places on our passport. You have to have all kinds of legal requirements, meet them. And so I had already enrolled in an MBA program, distance learning. And we found out that if I transitioned to the full-time program, because I was at the master's level and I had 20 years of work experience, I was able to get a special visa that enabled my spouse and children to join me, and my spouse was allowed to work. So that's what we did. We relocated on a student visa for me. No pressure, like I had to pass all my classes. Yeah. Otherwise, that visa was no longer valid. So we went to the UK on student visas.
And I want to go back to why so many requirements for South Africa, because maybe people don't realize how challenging that is. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why?
Yes, I think that it's true of a number of states that your passport determines the freedom that you have to move across borders. And South Africa, for a number of reasons, is not a sought after passport for crossing the border. We have had some issues with corruption that have made our passports even more challenging. Perhaps people don't know, but Johannesburg is, along with Lagos, Johannesburg in the south, Lagos, Nigeria in the north, are the two financial capitals of the continent. And we have a lot of immigrants that move across our border from our surrounding neighbors without any paperwork. And if they are able to acquire a South African identity document, they are then also able to acquire a passport, a South African passport, which enables them to travel. And the UK, in fact, uncovered massive fraud with passports and identity documents and illegal immigrants. And so ultimately instituted a visa requirement at a significantly larger cost. So I haven't answered your question. I've given you some background.
But it's important.
It is important. It provides context. If you have a European passport, a British passport, an Irish passport, or an American passport, and a Canadian passport, you have a lot more freedom. And the reason for that is that those countries provide services to their citizens that are attractive. And what you don't want is to have illegal immigrants in your country straining your social services, which is why we need to have visas, so we can protect jobs and so that we can manage the number of people that are moving in and out of our country. It really is to protect the resources of the destination country that one is going to. So it's not that South Africans are bad and they don't want us. It's that, we need to be sure that when people are coming into our country, they have the resources that they need so as not to be a drain or strain on the country that they're going to.
Yes, I do think that is important as well. And yes, it can be tricky, like you said, when there are so many people getting documents illegally. And so they made you, of course, applying to, was it grad school? Was it undergrad? What did you have to apply for?
It was grad school.
That's a very big undertaking that not just anybody can apply for and get into.
Absolutely. So I jumped through a number of hoops to achieve that.
That really takes a lot of people. It's a long process. It's not an easy process. And so, yes, you would have to put a lot of manpower and time and energy into that to get in. So, what did you decide to study?
I did an MBA.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, not particularly creative, but I did an MBA. I'd been running a business for 10 years and I did not go to undergrad. I don't have an undergraduate degree. And I found a program that enabled me to enroll and matriculate onto the program. And the requirement was, 20 years of work experience, at least 10 of those at a senior level. So I was just really delighted to be able to embark on an education journey at that stage of my life.
I'm so excited that they have that kind of a requirement, because I feel the same. Sometimes people ask us, do your coaches have this certificate or that certificate? And sometimes I say, I'll take 5 years of teaching experience over a certificate any day.
Yeah.
Because they were sitting in a classroom for that certificate. They weren't teaching.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's wonderful that that's allowed. So, okay. And at that time you were married when you moved, and did you say kids?
Yes. Married, 2 children. We moved with a 9-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter.
All right.
And we went from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, which means that academic calendars did not align.
Oh, yes.
Very stressful. So in the southern hemisphere, in South Africa,
a lot of people move with children, and that's really important. So tell us
challenging.
Why it was hard and maybe what you would have done differently looking back.
It was hard emotionally. I think that I would have been more proactive about arranging grief counseling for our children, because our son particularly experienced significant grief. We had a domestic worker who worked in our business as well as with our family, and he had an exceptionally close relationship with her.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, she was Gogo, which is South African for granny. It's actually Zulu,
Forgive
and it
me.
means granny. And because my parents lived so far from us, you know, we weren't able to have a granny presence all of the time. So he had this very close relationship with the woman that he trusted and had known most of his life. And he also had a very special friend that he'd met in preschool and had gone through, you know, primary school, or was going through primary school with. And he experienced intense heartache at this incredible loss of his world. It changed.
Yeah.
Our daughter was at a very sensitive age in her development, going, you know, in puberty. I mean, at 14, just going into high school, figuring out, you know, who she is and deciding what tribe she wants to join, and then moving into a foreign country. So despite the fact that we speak English, we speak South African, we go in to the UK, the language is different, the terminology is different, the culture is different, and the schooling is different, the weather is different. You know, anything you can think of is not the same as it is at home. And so I would have instituted grief counseling early on. And I don't think that I would have done anything differently. You know, it was the right decision for us as a family.
Yeah.
We did it in the kindest, most expedient way that we could. And we were doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And it is a hard experience. It doesn't matter what you do. It is a
Yeah.
hard experience. It's hard on your heart. It's hard on your identity. It's very hard on your wallet. You know,
Oh, yeah.
it is a difficult, challenging experience. And I believe it develops grit in a profound way.
Very. Yes. I completely agree. Can you tell me some of the, I know you mentioned 4 or 5 things that were different. I'd like to dig deep into that, mainly because I hear again and again the misconception of they both speak English. There's not going to be as many challenges as going from America to Japan, or, you know, Japan to Turkey. But that's the wrong belief. It's simply not true. So can you tell us and speak to moving into a different country, even if it's the same language, is not easy? Tell us why. Tell us some reasons.
Language is informed by culture, and culture is informed by language. They are, you know, inextricably connected. And if you haven't experienced the culture, it is difficult to understand the intention in what someone is saying. Also, you know, one has a different vocabulary. So I know many things by 3 names. And I was mortified to discover that when I was telling people in England that they had, you know, those are lovely pants. Pants is your underwear.
Really? I didn't know that one.
Yes, in England, you don't talk about people's pants because that's
How
their undies.
embarrassing.
You talk about their
Oh,
trousers. You know, simple things like that. It would have been helpful to have learned some of the vocabulary going into the experience, instead of having this almost arrogant expectation that because I'm English and I come from an English colony and my great parents are, you know, are English, that I was just going to fit perfectly into their culture and that I wouldn't even sound different. How naive and how terribly arrogant. You know, I think that that's probably what really trips us up, is that we believe that because we have the similar language that everyone's going to understand us, and they don't. I mean, people would look at me in England when I'd be talking. I thought I was having a wonderful conversation in the first few months that I arrived. They had no idea what I was talking about. No idea. They would sort of look at me deadpan, unable to connect, because I had a really strong accent. And
do you think it's changed now? Because it doesn't sound strong to me.
I don't believe it's as strong as it was. In fact, it probably isn't strong. Within about 6 months of living in the UK, I really made an effort to adjust my vowels. South African vowels are very flat.
Interesting.
It's the influence of, many languages. South Africa has 11 official languages.
Exactly. It's got to have influence.
Yeah, absolutely. So I tried to change the way my vowels sound specifically, but I also didn't want to become English. My identity is connected to my culture, to my language, to my history, and I didn't want to pretend to be an English person, because I'm not an English person.
Yeah, no.
But I wanted to be easier to understand, and so I helped my children with their vowels, and I try to make my vowels a little less flat so that it was easier to understand. It's so funny being in America. People all mistake me for being British.
Yes, it's very hard for us to distinguish unless it's very strong or you've actually spoken to a lot of South Africans, because we don't meet a lot of South Africans, do we?
That's true.
Even myself, when I travel tons, I just haven't. Yeah.
Although I will say that I had the ultimate compliment I was on conference a couple of weeks ago, and I foolishly locked myself out of my hotel room. So I went down to reception at 11 o'clock at night and said, I've done a silly thing. I've locked myself out of my room, which is a very English thing to say. And I didn't even realize. And this lovely man at the front desk said, oh, that was a silly thing to do, he says. He said, and I think you sound a little like me. And so I laughed and I said, well, if I was in England, they wouldn't say that. I'm from Johannesburg. And he said, oh, right, absolutely. Now I hear it. And I just thought, wow, imagine if I'd been able to accomplish that kind of integration all those years ago, that it would have been a much easier experience. It was a very challenging experience.
Absolutely. Tell me more about, can you tell us I love storytelling, and so we can really picture the experience. My background is in writing and reading a lot of books. So if you can tell us any specific stories about why it's hard, because I think, not all of us in Relo have relocated, right? And so these stories really help us understand. So I'd love any stories about specifically why it was hard.
Yes, the UK is a very private culture. Privacy is, utmost. So no eye contact on the train. You don't chat to your neighbor. You just really respect other people's personal space. And that is not my culture. My culture is warm and friendly to anyone. And so I have two stories. My first story, I'm standing in Waitrose, which is a very upmarket sort of Whole Foods grocery store. And the woman in front of me has got this amazing array of goods that she has procured. I'm standing waiting to check out, and she's got champagne and fruit and all kinds of, fabulous stuff. And where I come from, if I was standing in Woolies at the grocery store and someone had done that, I would have said, wow, that looks like it's going to be an amazing party.
Yes,
and
me too.
I said, wow, that looks like it's going to be an amazing party. She looked at me like I had another head, and she turned her back on me. This was this barrier between her and I, because what I had done was mortally offensive to her. And that's the culture, and I didn't know. in retrospect, I would never have done that, right? Because it was inappropriate, it was intrusive, it was rude, it was impolite. I mean, just the list is endless.
That would be excruciating for me.
It was.
Excruciating not to say something. It's literally like someone's choking me if I can't check.
I'm so glad you feel the same way. So that was one experience.
Yeah, I'm from Oklahoma City. Yeah. Okay, so you just being you was offensive to people, and that's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. Well, of course, I mean, I was so arrogant because I didn't know that was offensive in their culture. I thought, wow, what a rude woman.
and exactly, it's I hear this a lot from I have friends from all over because I love to travel, and I tried to tell somebody, people have misconceptions and they say, oh, French people are rude. I say they're rude if you compare it to your culture, but
Yes.
they're not rude in general. Like,
correct.
For them, it's a different. It's like when someone says, Micah, you're really, chatty and out there and this and that. I said, for you, again, for you, but in Oklahoma City, it's the norm.
Right.
And so I think it's important to say, yeah, she was not being rude for an English person in England. Yeah.
Correct.
Exactly. And we have to understand because we are there, right?
Right.
Yeah. So continue. I think it's important to, it's not that we're saying this is a negative thing. This is just a characteristic. Yeah.
It is a characteristic. Absolutely. And being aware of other people's culture when you are in their country is so important, because otherwise, you ultimately exclude yourself by behaving in ways that are unacceptable to the host.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's not about not being you. It's about respecting where you are.
Absolutely.
And yeah, there's like careful ways to say this, right? But it's about respecting really who is around you. Yeah. Okay. Story number 2.
Story number 2. I used to walk our son to school in the morning. Because, so a little context, you go from your home country where you've been, we left in our 40s. We were successful. We had all the bells and whistles, we had everything we needed. We were successful. We traded in, we cashed everything that we had to be able to make this move on our own from Johannesburg to the UK. And so when we got to the UK, we could only afford one car. And I was very grateful that we had a car, because often we were not near public transport, and my husband needed to get to work. So I would walk our son to school, and then I'd walk home, and then I'd walk back to fetch him, and then we'd walk home together. So I was doing a fair amount of walking. I was probably walking about 6 or 7 miles a day.
I feel you.
I will say I was probably the thinnest I've been. Amazing what walking does for a girl's figure, just saying.
Oh gosh, yes, I agree.
But I would walk our boy, and he wore a uniform, and
common there, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I saw the same moms and their boys every day.
Yeah.
I would see them on the sidewalk, the pavement, and going there. I would see them walking back. I would go in the afternoon and wait for him. They'd all be standing around. And it was excruciating for me, because no one ever made eye contact with me. No one ever acknowledged that I existed.
Did they stand and talk to each other?
Yes.
Oh.
I was completely an outsider. I did that for 6 months. And I did not exist at all. And then...
Because they knew where you were from, or because you were just new? That's why I'm curious. Okay, just new. It was not a South African thing per se. No, just we don't know you. We didn't grow up with you.
Right.
Got it.
Absolutely. And I probably didn't dress the same as they did. there's definitely a uniform, right? You need to figure out what the uniform is of where you're going. And if you want, and then you make the decision, do I want to wear the uniform and fit in? Or am I going to be who I am and run the risk of not fitting in? So that's an active, challenging decision that you need to make. And so I kind of, I had one foot in either camp. Because I'm a self-possessed, confident woman. I'm not a young woman. I had a lot of experiences, and I want to be myself, but I also desperately needed to be included. I have never felt so excluded as I did when I arrived in England.
Yes. And you're answering Catalina D's question. She said, are we just not able to be ourselves if we want to have a life in the new place? And you're kind of answering that right now. It's a decision, right?
It is, absolutely. And there are a number of those decisions, and it's important to stay true to your values. But it's okay to make adjustments so that you can have a sense of belonging. I made the adjustment to my vowels so that people could understand me. I didn't
They
really
really
adjust the
couldn't
way I
understand
dressed.
you. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I've been away from home for 10 years, so I probably don't sound anything like I did when I first arrived.
But I think it's important for people to know that there are challenges between English speakers on just accents. It's not cultural misunderstandings always. It's actual accents as well. Yeah, I think that's really important. I want to just stress that for a second, because we've gotten some requests lately for stuff for South Africans. And I don't think surprised, but I don't think I realized to the extent to which you are saying, I had to tweak my vowels a little bit so that communication was a little easier. So fascinating. Yeah. So let's keep talking about being yourself and that decision, because I think that's deep.
I had support. I arrived in England and I had my mom and my sister, my older sister, who's married to an Englishman.
Oh, okay.
And he has a wonderful accent. He's a Londoner, speaks like that. I love listening to his accent.
Yay.
And my sister had, raised in South Africa, went to England, met an amazing man, moved with him to America, and then 16 years later moved back to the UK. So she had a real sense of what it was like to integrate and be yourself. And
nice.
I kept saying, I need to become someone that can be accepted, because I was watching it happen to my children. And I didn't want to be that parent that was, they were trying so hard to integrate. And then I'm that parent who sounds weird and does strange things and dresses funny. And, I really wanted to support my children. And she gave me some really good advice. It was permission. She gave me permission to be myself. And she reminded me, and I think it was because of the fact that she is my older sister and I adore her and have so much respect for her, that when she reminded me that it was okay to be me because I'm an incredible woman. She said, you're an incredible woman. It's okay to be yourself. Stop trying to change and just be yourself. But ultimately, England wasn't my place. I never felt sufficiently at home to settle. And so, and I was concerned about my son's well-being, particularly. My daughter was managing to integrate, and I think if we'd stayed, she would have made a life for herself. But our son was really taking strain. He was experiencing extreme bullying.
I was going to say, I want to know what they went through and why.
Yeah, our son was victimized, insulted, assaulted constantly. In the time that we were there, he went to 3 schools. It happened in all 3 schools.
Oh.
And, I think a lot of that was on us, because there are a number of things that lead to a child being bullied. And this is, we could have another hour conversation about that. You bully-proof your child for your own culture. That doesn't mean they're bully-proof for another culture.
Wow.
And he didn't understand English humor. It's very different from South African humor. And they refer to it as banter, and you need to have been raised in banter to be able to cope with it as a 9 or 10-year-old. Otherwise, it just feels like a personal attack. And if you add to that the fact that he was going through, extreme grief, I think that, there were so many factors that led to him really struggling in England. And I was deeply concerned. I remember having a conversation with my husband, and I said, I don't think that all 4 of us are going to make it if we stay in England. I think we're going to have a tragedy. And I'm just going to let that settle. Like, I was concerned that one of my children wasn't going to make it because of the extreme emotional strain and psychological strain that they had experienced.
Yeah.
And so we were, looking, okay, well, how are we going to solve this problem?
Yeah.
I'd already graduated and had an MBA, and I was looking for work. And our daughter mentioned a university that she wanted to attend here in the States. And I thought, I just can't have an ocean between us.
Yeah.
I must be able to find work. And so I went onto the talk about stalking your kid. I went onto the university website that she was thinking about going to, and I thought, maybe they've got a job for me. Well, they did. They had a fantastic job for me. So we ended up relocating as a family to the USA so that I could take up this role. And our daughter went to the college.
I can't believe you got that job. You found the job. You got the job.
I did.
Oh my
I
God.
got
This is such a good tip for everybody. Like, you can stalk your kid and move to the US. You can stay with them. You have to just be creative. Yeah.
You do. Yeah.
Oh,
I've met many parents that have stalked their children and gotten jobs at the institutions that they want to attend. There are all kinds of benefits to doing that, but I'm really grateful
Absolutely.
that,
and was that in St. Louis?
No. So initially we arrived and lived in a tiny village called Elsa, which is in southern Illinois. The nearest town is Alton. Your colleague is from Alton, I believe.
Yes. And I was just in Chicago, which it's definitely not near there. Yeah.
No. On the Mississippi.
Far south.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So I was faculty. I joined the university or the college as business faculty.
How cool.
And spent 7 years there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And you were teaching business.
I was, yeah.
Oh, my dream is to teach still, to go back to school and teach. So I'm going to bow down. I love it. I just want to be a professor.
It's not all it's cut out to be, just so you know.
I know. And that's actually what my mom said to me. She said, she said, are you sure this is the way you want to go? She said, I know you, and I just don't see you doing it. So I get it.
I think that's what makes it easier is if you are scholarly. And I'm a practitioner. I'm not a scholar. She says halfway through a doctorate program.
But that's what my mom said. And I'm super scholarly, but she goes, you're a practitioner. You're literally learning your 5th language to learn more about second language acquisition. Like, you're in the field.
Yeah.
You're not in a library. Yeah. And I was like, but I can write about it, and that can be my dissertation, So another
girlfriend. Don't let anyone tell you your idea is not good for you.
So, okay, so you decided Southern Illinois, small town. And how old were your kids at this point?
Our daughter was 17 and our son was 12.
Okay, so you're like, we got to get our kids out of here, but we need to stay together. So we're all going to go. And then this time, so the UK move, you got the student visa that got everyone there. And then this time it's the faculty position and your daughter's student visa.
No, H-1B visa. All my family were dependents on my H-1B visa.
So everyone was dependent on you again.
Yeah.
Lots of power here.
30 years ago, he said he was marrying me so I'd be rich and famous and he'd be a kept man. But what he said, fortunately, I'm a follower. He's followed, 2 countries and counting.
Well, it doesn't work if both people are pushing. So I think this has worked out just fine for everyone. So okay, so you tell your daughter we're all going to do this. She gets into the school, you get the job, you tell your son we're out of here. How did that first year go?
Oh my word, what an unmitigated disaster.
Why? And
Same deal, right? Same deal. Different English,
yeah.
very strong culture.
In a small town.
In a small town. Yeah, it's the same deal. And
3 punches again.
except now when you talk about trousers, people don't know what you're talking about.
At all. Yeah. Just clueless. At least you're not saying anything embarrassing, but they just don't have any idea what you're saying.
No, I'm sure I've said plenty of embarrassing things.
Well, just not the trousers.
But now I have a better sense of what it's all about. And so, and I'm also working with, undergraduate students between the ages of 18 and 22.
Yeah, you have the heart of the country in your classes.
I do. And an opportunity to really influence the leaders of tomorrow in significant ways about diversity and acceptance and kindness. And so I became the professor that people would go to try and understand international students and the international student experience. And because I'm African, I have a better sense of what African cultures are about. You're talking about a formal culture as opposed to an informal culture, a collectivist as opposed to individualist. So really helping professors understand how to engage their African and South American students in the class because they're not accustomed to speaking out in class. It's not our culture.
Oh,
yeah.
I would have thought it was the opposite because of the friendliness. But no, bad assumption. Okay. And what do you think that comes from? Is that from the British? Is that from the African?
It's definitely African.
African
and it's
is
tribal.
What I was thinking.
So
tribal. Yes. That's what I was thinking. Okay, cool.
Think about the structure of the tribe, that you have the chiefs, elders.
You follow.
Right. Yeah.
You respect. You don't question. You don't push back. A little more Japanese. It's the whole. It's not you.
Right. Yeah, collectivist, absolutely.
Collectivist. Okay, that's great to know.
And I was also known as the professor who would call out any kind of cultural bullying. So, making fun of people's names, pronouncing them in a strange way. I was always happy to, in a kind way, to draw attention to the fact that it's not okay to do that. And my students would be quite funny. So I'm there speaking in this accent, and I would see them sort of turn to each other and say, "What did she say?" So I've learned I don't speak with an American accent. I haven't been able to crack the American accent, but I do.
Oh, you shouldn't. It's so pretty the way it is.
I do know that, you guys say things differently from the way I say them. And so when I talk about inventory, I remember to say inventory. And I'm now at the point in my relationship with Americanese and Americans where we're actually joking. So in the company that I've been in for the last 7 months, my employees and I, or my colleagues actually, and I, we laugh. We make jokes about the strange things that I say. And when I speak in their accent and pronounce things so that they can understand, it sounds so strange that they all start laughing when I speak it. And I feel very accepted. This place where I am now feels like home. It feels, it's been a long time for me to have this sense of acceptance and inclusion. And I didn't expect that it would happen here. I thought it would happen in an environment where people were highly educated and scholarly and from all over the country and well-traveled. I thought that would be the place that I would experience ultimate acceptance for being different. And yet here it is in this place where I work. It's very cool.
Talk to us a little bit about that environment that you're in. Do you think it has to do with the city, or is it just with the group of people? Tell us Because everyone wants what you're describing, right? We all want that environment at our works, and everyone is talking about, diversity and inclusion and making it happen. And you feel comfortable and you're diverse and you're included. And so tell us why you think, what was the recipe, or why is it working at your job?
There were a number of things in my favor. One, I came into the organization as the president. And so there's an expectation of, there's some formality involved. And I wouldn't ordinarily be on the receiving end of cultural bullying as the president of an organization. So there's
Sure.
power in my favor. And I also came into this experience with a genuine love of the city that I live in. And
and tell us where you live. I don't know if we mentioned.
Yes, we did. I live in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
And I live downtown in an historic part of the city. So I live in a Victorian row house. And it's a very cool experience. But when I came into this company, I said that I loved the big sky in St. Louis, and I felt very much at home here. And what that did was it framed their response to me, because I complimented their country, their city. I complimented their culture.
Yeah.
I said that I felt at home here. I said that I really like to live here. And what that did was create a foundation for a totally different conversation, that if I'd come into this experience and had nothing but negative things to say about American culture or St. Louis or, whatever it is. So I think there's respect required on both sides for diversity to work. Of any kind, there's respect required on both sides. Yeah.
I think it's so important what you said. I kind of have a funny, the specific thing you said is complimenting the place that you're at. I couldn't agree more that saying negative things to the new place that you've moved to among people that are from there is the first way to make not friends and to push people away. I am the one token American in my group of friends of people from all over the world. And so when I go to parties, sometimes I'll see people complaining that they think in a comfortable place where everyone's an expat, but I'm from the US, and yeah, they'll be complaining about things, and it hurts if you're from that place when people are saying it. And I've definitely not answered in a sweet way. One time I said, then why are you here? If you hate it so much, why are you here?
It's a fair question. It really is a fair question. And I think it's important to find in the place that you go, to find people that are like you, but not to gravitate only to those, right? We need to actually integrate into the society that we've joined. We need to have friends that are local. Yeah. But we have 3 very specific friends as a couple. That one is we have English friends who are from England. We have South African friends who are from Johannesburg. And then we have American friends. And I love hanging out with the South African friends, because for the first half hour, I get to complain about all the stuff that drives me insane about living in America.
Exactly.
And I love that, because there's no judgment and I don't offend anybody. And
I
get it off my chest.
Know your audience. Yes.
And I love that we have English friends, because I have been able to make peace with my English experience by getting to know these wonderful people whom I adore. And I love that we have American friends, because I get to learn so much more about the culture.
Yeah.
And share my own with them. So I think it is important to have some connection to where you are from. But I will say that I never sought out South African people in England, because I wanted to try and become a part of that society. And the same in America. I did not seek out South African friends. We made South African friends after we'd been here for probably 6 years. And they are the only South African friends that we have, because they have a similar mindset to us. Yes. And the other piece of advice that I got from my sister about relocating was she said to me, be sure to be friends with South Africans that you would be friends with if you were in Johannesburg. Don't just be friends with South Africans because they're South African. Choose your friends the same as you would anywhere else. Don't be blinded to who they are simply because they're from the same place that you are, because they may not have the same values you do. And I will say that as a South African, there's such a stereotype and stigma to white South Africans being racists, and the legacy of apartheid, it follows me into a room, or it leads me into a room and it follows me out.
Wow.
And I have to work really hard as an individual for people to know that, I may have been raised as a racist in a racist country, but I am not a racist. I want to interact with all people regardless.
Yeah.
And I've raised my children to not discriminate based on color or culture or language. And so I don't want to associate with people who don't share those values just because they come from where I come from.
Yes, absolutely. And there is a bit of that all over the world, right? We have people that believe in one way or the other everywhere. It's not a country specific. And so we have to, I think that's such a good tip. Just because you're from the same place doesn't mean you have the same values with all things.
Absolutely.
Before we go, I just have two more questions, specifically about giving helpful tips to those who might be moving anywhere, and then specifically to the UK or the US from South Africa. So tell us, how did things get easier for your children in the US? I'd like to know. And then can you help parents who have the same worry with any tips or, anything, just, be patient or listen to them, or what can you tell us to do for our kids if we're moving them? First give me an update. How was it?
They're great. Our son is 19, our daughter's 25,
oh, wow.
24, about to be 25, and they have created wonderful lives for themselves. And I'm going to back up and then close it. Our children were so incredibly angry and resentful at being moved. They really acted out. They enraged even to have your life destroyed and then be told that I've destroyed your life for your own good. That is hard for a kid to, even a teenager struggles to hear that.
Yeah.
That is really difficult to process. And so I think that getting help, psychological help before you leave the country, and understanding what your kid is going to be grappling with psychologically, culture aside, as a result of this separation from their friends and family and what they know and their security, actually preempting that is very important. I wish I had known that was something that was needed to do.
Great tip.
Our son was getting help from a counselor for other reasons. And when she heard that we were moving, she gave me some steps to follow about how to make that move easier for our son. I followed those steps. The move was brutal for him. And he was angry when we moved to the UK. I think he experienced some relief when we moved to the US, but he was still pretty, pissed off.
Pissed off? I was going to
but that's kind of how he was.
You got to use it.
And at the age of 19, a couple of months ago, one late night when we had the giggles, just the two of us, he thanked me for my courage.
Wow.
And forgave me and told me that he was no longer angry.
Oh.
10 years. 10 years. It's, I'm grateful that we're at that point now as adults, that he can understand why we did it, and he can see the blessing that it has afforded him. But having your child be that angry and broken and hurt, you need to get help with that. You can't just muscle through on your own. So I would say that establishing psychological resources before you leave and when you get to country is really important to deal with that separation.
Do you think it would have been easier if they were younger?
Much younger.
Much
Yes.
younger, right? Like 5, 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Under 6.
Under 6. Okay. Yes.
But
And
I mean, I think that speaking with an expert about the cognitive development and psychological development of children is, that's just me as a mom. I don't know anything about that, but
yes.
I think the younger your children are, the easier it is.
Yeah.
Moving them, between 6 and 16, that's a really hard time to move. But you also have to, sometimes that's what you have to do. And so
absolutely. And
yeah.
and tons of our clients and friends, and yes, they have to move, and they're moving. Absolutely. Yeah. Very good. And then the last thing for you as adults, for you and your husband, what kind of tips can you tell us? I mean, you've given us so many wonderful tips about meeting people from where you're from and meeting people. Actually, I want to go back to that, meeting friends in the new place. I think it's the most challenging for most people to make friends locally. Do you have any suggestions on how to do that?
Absolutely.
That's what I hear. I mean, that was the hardest for me when I moved to Mexico. Not only was it awkward, my Spanish wasn't good, the culture, you just wanted to, I'd rather just sit at home and watch TV than go feel horrible. So, yes, tell us about how to do that.
How I did it was in each country that I found myself in, both at home in South Africa, in the UK, and in the States. I have a particular faith practice, and so I sought out a community where I could participate in my case, church activities. So I would be with like-minded people who had similar values, who were delighted to meet someone of their own faith from another country. And that is actually how I made friends. And I included my children by taking them, to Sunday school. So, finding an activity where people would be open to encountering people from another country is really what I would suggest. But I was really fortunate that because the movement that I'm involved with has got churches all over the world, there's this wonderful sense of a global community, and I never felt that I was excluded or other at all in the church.
Wonderful.
Any of the churches that I attended in order to find my place. Yeah.
Yes, yes. If we have a faith, that should definitely be the first place, because hopefully the value system already is set up as an inclusive place, right?
Absolutely.
Where people want to. So Aaron Venable asks, how was your husband during these transitions?
My husband was a rock. He, he made things happen and supported our children in any way that he could. On the daily, he was involved with our son's education, specifically because of the challenges that he was facing socially.
Yeah.
And he was really a champion for protecting our children and helping to develop understanding within the school environment for what our children needed. And, he just made things happen. When I said, let's go to the US, I've got this amazing job offer, he went straight to the organization that he was working for, a global consulting firm, and said, my wife's planning on moving to the US and I'd really like to stay married to her because we have 2 great kids together. Any chance I could get an intercompany transfer? And they made that happen.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Yeah. And then when we got to the UK, finding a job outside of the country when you're not in country is impossible. You simply cannot do it. you have to be in country, you've got to have all your documentation in place, and then the job search starts. And it took my husband in the region of 5 months to find ultimately the position that was right for him. I think he applied for something like 432 jobs, some crazy
Yes.
arbitrary number like that, but it was in the 400s job applications. And eventually, connecting on LinkedIn and speaking to people and just keeping at it, he landed himself a really amazing role with an international consulting firm that valued his expertise and his global experience, and were delighted to hire him, and ultimately were just as excited to transfer him. So he contributed in significant ways, both as a family and particularly financially, to make it work. And of course, when I was away on my MBA, he was raising our kids with my mom. So yeah.
I got to meet this guy.
He's a pretty cool guy.
He's a pretty cool guy. You picked very well, Colleen.
Thank you.
I love it. Well, we are going to wrap up. I just want to say thank you for such an intimate picture of your life. That's really what we do here. Robert last week was so frank about his challenges, and you were as well today. It's so important for people to understand what's ahead of them if they are moving, or for people who are in this industry moving people to understand what's ahead of the people they're helping. And so thank you so much. I know it sounds trite to just say thank you, but it was just a wonderful interview.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed our hour together. Thank you.
Yes. And I'll probably reach out to you again. Maybe we'll have a Colleen part 2. I feel like there's so much more we could chat about. That's what we did with Robert. We're like, can you come back in April? There's so much more story.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, everyone. And I'll just remind everyone, we do have the Spanish classes for HR that we have every other Wednesday. So you can reach out to me or John Colditz, who sets up all of our expat chats, and we'll give you that. And then I believe next week we have our English for Business. And so we'll be having some fun idioms from America, phrasal verbs from America that even if you're South African, if you would like to join, we'll be teaching some of those fun things that Americans say. So thank you again, Colleen. And I definitely want to meet you in person and grab lunch next time that I'm in St. Louis.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, Micah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.